Okay, I'll tell you what, guys, what I want you to do, if you can move over a little bit. You're good. I want to move you over a little bit. Yeah, if you don't mind. And you want to get about 3 or 4 fingers away from the microphone. You can pull it up to you. It's fine. Yeah, that's fine. And, all right, guys, let's do this. Give me a mic check. Please.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
No, it never works for you.
Put this on.
All right, Traven?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Good talk.
Can you hear me?
Heck no. And you are on number 5. And if you give me a mic check.
Testing.
Okay, it still works. Okay, good. Mine I know doesn't work, so we're good. How's your ears, guys?
Good.
Good? What number are you on? You're on number 3. You need a little more?
Yeah, I just want to see if it's up. Can you?
Okay, hang on, gang. Here we go. Hang on, here we go. And now it is time for the preacher's kid and the pastor. Opinions expressed are those of the show's guests and not the opinions of the staff and management of WSTU. Any recordings without written permission of WSTU is strictly prohibited. And here are your hosts, Pastor Dino and Traven. And good afternoon, gentlemen.
Thank you, Ray. Good to see you, my friend. And we're always glad to see you. And Traven, just not long ago, my wife and I finished our trust. And I think it was the second one we've done. And the paperwork and the work on that thing. I am so glad it's done. And don't ask me any questions about it tonight, but you have somebody we can talk tonight and find out what I really did, right?
I do have had the privilege of working with Peggy now for probably about 7, 8 years. I think I bought the practice down here in 2017, so we've been kind of working together, and I've had the opportunity to introduce her to many of my clients, and she's been able to help them, which I'm really grateful for. But Peggy Wood's with us today. She's with McCarthy Summers here, a local firm that's been here a long time. And so we're really delighted that you're here. And our topic was wills and trust, but we may vary a little bit, because we may get into some side discussions. We do welcome our guests to call in. And I'm
220 WSTU. Took me about 220 WSTU 9788. Ray always points this out for me.
So feel free to call in.
I'm giving the wrong number a few times. Is that right?
I'm going to make a broadcaster out of you. You've already got the great voice. 220-9788 or 220.
WSTU.
Exactly.
And do call in because we have some good stuff tonight.
Yeah, so to start the program, just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself. I know that we were talking about you moved here from Maryland, but your parents are from Pittsburgh. Dino also spent a great deal of time in Pennsylvania, not from Ohio. So I kind of consider you kind of like part of the Midwest, So why don't you tell us a little bit about you, your firm, your specialty, kind of what you do and those types of things. What brought you here?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. Let's see. I am a native of Baltimore, so grew up outside Baltimore. Went to the University of Maryland for my undergrad. Went down to Chapel Hill, North Carolina for law school, and decided that I wanted to clerk for a judge after law school. So that's what brought me down to Florida. Lived in West Palm for about 2 years, then found my way up here to Martin County, and have been with McCarthy Summers since 2011.
Wow. So yeah, you've been there for a while.
Yep.
Now they've been around 40, 50 years or something like
For
that?
quite several decades,
Yeah.
in some form or another.
Yeah. Now how many attorneys are with the firm there? Would you say?
So I think we've got 12 attorneys,
Okay.
so pretty good size for a steward.
Yeah. Now your specialty is more in the wills trust, more of estate planning. I call family planning, and I know you have someone you work there with elder planning also.
Mhm.
So for our audiences, like maybe give us a little preview of what it is that you do kind of for your clients.
Sure. So about half of our practice is trust and estates, elder law, as you mentioned. So we have an attorney who does Medicaid planning, long-term care planning. My particular focus is kind of traditional estate planning. So putting together just a estate planning package, working through those issues. We also have a family law attorney in our office, and real estate, and just general civil law. So we kind of cover the waterfront.
Yeah, it sounds like you got it pretty well covered. Now, our topic is wills and trusts, and as you, for the audience out there, when you think about, most people think about a will, but when you give them the word trust, they're like, I don't know, do I need a trust? But I don't know what to do now. My background, because I've been in planning for over 40 years, I know that trust, I mean, I'm going back, but I remember there was about over a dozen different types of trust.
Mhm.
So trust is a big term, a big umbrella term that can cover a lot of different things. And trusts are very malleable, so you can kind of customize them. Does that sound correct? But from a simplistic view, what in your mind is kind of the difference between a simple will and just maybe just a living trust, and for the perspective of the people in our audience?
Sure. So kind of the typical arrangement that we see with a trust is just a revocable trust. So that's a document that you put together where you can make any changes that you want, so long as you have capacity and you're living. And those trusts are useful for planning in the event of incapacity. So if you become ill, can't manage your assets anymore, you've got a vehicle in place for someone to step in and take over for you. So that's kind of the first benefit. The second benefit, most folks come to us wanting to avoid a probate administration when they pass away. So trust avoid probate. Any asset that's in your trust or payable to your trust when you pass away, that avoids a probate. And then the third kind of main reason you'd use a trust is if you want to make sure that the assets in the trust don't necessarily pass outright to your beneficiaries immediately when you pass away. So if your beneficiaries have maybe some potential creditor issues, or you just want to kind of spread the distributions out, maybe you want to preserve some of that wealth for future generations, then you hold the assets in trust.
Yeah, and to that last point, I think about one of the clients that you and I worked on. We have a client who has a son who's probably in his 40s and kind of a special needs situation. So that definitely have a need for that. So because she has a son who's 40, but she's is in her mid 70s, and her husband already recently passed. And as you look at longevity, maybe hopefully she lives another 20 years or so, but she has set up provisions to make sure that the son's provided for, because he was in an auto accident several years ago. But you don't necessarily want to leave those assets to him directly, but do it in a trust so they're protected for his benefit. So those are some things that Peggy can work on for you. She's really good at that type of thing, getting to know the client and what their specific needs are. And I think it's all about that relationship, getting to know the client, that type of thing.
And just saying a word about a trust, Peggy, for us, for our family. As I said, we just did our trust. And what I did, I have 4 children. I brought them to the house, and we kind of walked through the trust so that they would know what happens to Mom and I, what they were there to do. I do recommend that kind of thing. We found that very beneficial for our family to talk through. This is what's going on. It's kind of interesting. My one son is very knowledgeable. He was very communicative. My daughter and I have a very close relationship. She's kind of teary-eyed, thinking, "You're not going to die now, are you?" And then my other son is looking at me and says, "Dad don't look so good right now." But you recommend that kind of thing when people do that? Is that something that's helpful, do you feel?
It's really personal to each client. Some clients do want to be really open with their kids and want them to kind of know everything. Some clients are more, cards close to the vest. They prefer not to reveal that kind of information.
It's funny because we did that. I came from a big family. There's 8 of us, but thank God we all were not there. But my older brother wanted us to, as many as possible, to be there. We sat down with my parents and the attorney. Thank God I knew the attorney. But we sat there, and I felt like I don't know, you guys probably aren't old enough. I know you're not. I remember the show, The Beverly Hillbillies. I felt like we were the Clampets, like with everybody there. And I'm like, is this really necessary that we all be here for this signing, so to speak? Because my mom and dad were not people of really a lot of wealth or anything. So I'm like, this is probably an overkill. But it is kind of comical, and it is, it is a personal thing, I think,
Mhm.
you know, to
Yeah,
to do that. Now, you know, one of the things that I think people struggle with is like when they leave property, like what should I pass in the will or what can be passed via will? What should go to my trust, assuming you have a trust that is changeable, so to speak, that you can make provisions for. What would you recommend people, like, and I think about normal, you know, everyday people, like I have a home, I have maybe an investment account, I have an IRA, you know, I have maybe a couple cars, and I might have a property outside of my home, maybe I have a, you know, condo. You know, for us people here in Florida, maybe we have a condo up north someplace, which is a little cooler in the summer. So what's your thoughts on, you know, property and where that should be placed?
Sure. Well, if you take let's say a single client, someone who's widowed or single, they have a trust in place. Putting those assets into the trust, real property, especially out of state real property, that's helpful to avoid probate administration. The assets are just going to pass pursuant to the terms of the trust. Uh, Retirement accounts are a little stickier because of the income tax consequences when those assets are withdrawn. So that takes some discussion with your financial advisor, your accountant, your attorney. But certainly, to the extent there are appropriate assets, putting them in a trust can help you achieve your goals.
Yeah, typically your IRAs, any qualified plan will pass to a named beneficiary typically. But that's just, you know, those are some things.
Somebody wants to call in, 2-Traven-220 WSTU 220-9788. If you have specific questions, we would love to have Peggy answer those for us today. Thank you for being here, Peggy.
Absolutely.
Now, Peggy, I've heard the term your Passover or pour over is probably better, pour over will. Describe that process, if you will. Like, where does it come into place where you have a pour over will? And my assumption is it pours into the trust at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have a revocable trust, you're going to have a pour over will that works hand in hand with that trust. And I like to think of the will as a safety net. So if there's something that did not get transferred into your trust during your lifetime, still in your individual name, there would have to be a probate administration for that asset. But the residuary clause of the will says transfer it into my trust, and then it's going to be distributed pursuant to the terms of the trust. If you don't have a pour over will, then those probate assets are going to pass under the intestacy laws of Florida, which may be different than what your trust specifies.
When someone goes through this planning process with you, you know, setting up a will, trust, my assumption is you do durable powers at that point, also health powers, those types of things. Is that part of it, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think of estate planning in two parts. There's the lifetime piece, and then what happens after you pass away. So the lifetime piece would be durable powers of attorney, healthcare directives, and then also your trust. But you need documents in place to address what would happen if you became incapacitated, someone to make financial decisions for you and healthcare decisions.
Yeah, and that sometimes can be a challenge on who naming those trustees. You didn't name Joanna, did you? Because you have to know his daughters.
Yeah,
I hope
she'll,
you're listening, Joanna.
she'll run it.
But yeah, so that's always a challenge too. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, who do we name? Because we don't want anyone to be like offended.
Right.
But
yeah.
like in your situation, you have 4 children.
We had a good conversation
so-
about that. I can let the children help give input on that. And I think the right person was chosen to do that, you know. I think has the better handle on those kind of things. Let me ask you this, Peggy. What determines the length of time for a probate? I know people talk about, I'm doing something, it's a probate. It seems like I talked 6 months later, we're doing that, it's still a probate. Is there a determination of that?
So there are a couple of factors. If we have a formal probate administration, and there are kind of 2 flavors of probate in Florida, we have what's called a summary administration, and that's for very small estates. So estates that have less than $75,000 in assets, or the decedent has been deceased for more than 2 years. Then we can have a summary administration. That's a quick process. A formal probate administration is probably the one you're thinking of, where a personal representative would be appointed. And with that type of probate, there's a minimum 3-month creditor period that has to run. So you've got at least 3 months for that. If you have a taxable estate, an estate that's subject to federal estate tax, then we have to wait for the estate tax return to be filed and the IRS to issue a closing letter. So with that kind of estate, it could be, 2 years until the estate is closed. Now, most of the work is kind of done on the front end, so there might not be really much that's going on, but the estate can't be technically closed in that instance.
Now, you hear these terms, again, these are legal terms that you're very familiar with, but most of our listeners probably are not. You hear things like testamentary trust versus inter vivos trust. What's kind of the difference for those people out there, just in simple terms?
Sure. So a testamentary trust is one that's created when your will is probated. So the will itself contains trust provisions. When the will is admitted to probate, the trust kind of springs into life at that point. So if you, for whatever reason, don't want to go through the steps of establishing a revocable trust, inter vivos trust during your lifetime, you can still incorporate a trust into your estate plan by using that in your will.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at the kind of a cost, and again, this an average, if you will, I don't want to put you on the spot, but an average for people out there that are considering, because a lot of times they will be approached by, let's say, a legal firm that will approach them on doing a trust. I always recommend when somebody comes to me, I'm like, just work with the local attorney.
Mm-hmm.
What's an average cost for someone to come in and, if it's standard family, mom, dad, 2 kids, that type of thing, come in and do your wills and trusts? What would be kind of a cost? What do you think an average cost?
Sure.
And I know it's putting you on the spot because everyone has unique needs,
Right.
But just an average.
So I'm going to give you the lawyerly answer that
Okay.
it depends.
Yeah, good answer.
So it really, each situation is unique, which is why, there, of course, is the option of legal Zoom and,
Sure.
those types of forums. But we really do customize plans specific to each client's situation. So, it really does.
It does depend. Okay. What are like 3 or 4 things that you think people should consider as they're considering their estate planning, and what are the do's and the don'ts as they're looking at this from a legal standpoint?
Mm-hmm.
Like I think of young families, like, okay, I'm married, maybe I'm 35, 40, I have 2 children, I have a position, my wife has a position, so we're 2 income earners. What are some of the do's and don'ts, or at what age does someone really consider to do estate planning from your perspective?
Sure. So I think when you become an adult, you should have some type of estate plan in place. I actually had someone contact me the other day. Her daughter just turned 18 last week, going off to college. So she needs a power of attorney and healthcare directives if something happens to her. At this point, her parents don't have any right to make decisions for her. So we're putting these basic documents into place so her parents can act for her if she were to become incapacitated. So once you hit adulthood. And it's just as important to have those kind of lifetime documents in place, the power of attorney and the healthcare directives, as it is to have, a trust or will.
Wow.
That's insightful, isn't it?
Yeah,
It really is.
So so some of the triggers, are there any triggers out there that, like, the age is one thing, you gave an example, are there certain triggers that you see pretty consistently that people come to you and say, hey, I've been putting this off, but this happened? Are there some triggers that you see that consistently bring people to you?
Any kind of life change, major life change, so birth of a child,
Okay.
retirement, illness, inheritance from, a family member. Those folks often come in. But we always recommend clients pull out your plan every year, take a look at it. You don't necessarily have to come in to see us, but just make sure it's still relevant, still addresses your needs.
Yeah, when I moved to Florida, I remember, growing up in Ohio, but I've lived in Georgia, lived in Virginia, a number of other states. But I remember asking an attorney in Atlanta, I said, do you guys work in, I know you work in North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, you work in Florida? He goes, he looked at me like, what are you saying? And I go, did I ask a bad question? He goes, we don't service Florida. I said, why? He said, Florida's like another country. I said, really? So what do you think he meant by that? I mean, are our laws so different, or our provisions so different than other states?
Not that I've noticed. A lot of states have adopted uniform laws.
Okay.
So we have, uniform trust code. So we're pretty similar. And there certainly are unique aspects to Florida law. That's why we always recommend clients who are moving out of state, take your documents to an attorney licensed in your new state of residence, make sure that they meet all of the requirements of the new state. But, we're fairly similar.
Oh, so they are
To a lot of
reciprocal, and that's good. That's good. Yeah, because we had that happen. We had somebody move to Virginia. And I remember asking me, she goes, so all the work we did, do I have to redo it? I said, I don't think so. I think you can take this to an attorney there and let him or her know what you've done, and, so that's been good.
A lot of times we tell clients we'll Floridize their documents so that they bring them here. We don't have to kind of start from scratch. We're just making them consistent with Florida law.
Peggy, as a person gets purchasing properties, and some people that's their business almost getting properties. What do you recommend to them as far as wills and trusts and getting things prepared?
So I would probably refer them to a business attorney if they don't have one. But we certainly want to take a look at how their overall business fits in with their estate plan. Do they have a succession plan in place? Are they properly protected from a creditor standpoint? So I would work kind of collaboratively with their accountant as well.
Sure.
We're looking forward to having callers today too. If you want to call in, this is a great time to ask Peggy, who is really quite an expert on this topic of wills and trusts. I have often asked questions to many people on this topic, Peggy, and they've got some good answers usually, and you're giving some great answers tonight. I appreciate that so very much. And Draven, I'm glad you brought her in.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I was thinking about as you were coming in, I was thinking about when I meet like a new client or new prospect, I go through we call it the discovery process. You probably describe it the same way, but I have kind of for lack of a better term, about an 8 or 10 page document that I give my client to kind of complete, because you, like me, you need to know, who their spouse is if they have one, who their children are, their assets, that type of thing, their ownership, that type of thing. So describe for us kind of that process that you go through. Like if I make an introduction to you first time, kind of what's that process that you go through with the client so that make them comfortable with that?
Sure. Yeah, very similar. We have some intake forms that we ask clients to prepare or complete and return. If they have an estate plan currently in place, even if it's dated, it's helpful to see kind of where they're starting from. And then I have a sit-down meeting with them, talk about their goals and objectives, specific concerns that they have. So information gathering process, like I said, everything is specific to the client. We don't have kind of just a one size fits all plan.
Sure. Now, do you ask for like statements, like financial statements, like when I say financial statements, it's more investment statements, I should say. Like their last, maybe the last quarterly statement, and do you ask for like tax returns? You mentioned like any current documents you may have in a will or trust that you previously had worked with an attorney. That's a good thing to have. But you ask for all those other things. Like I used to tell people, I was like, fill up the shoebox and bring it to me. Bring everything you got.
Yeah.
But I have to financially undress them in order for me to know where they're at.
I've never used that term.
Well, I'm like, how can I do surgery if I don't know what you got?
Right.
I need to know what you have. So I can. And if you can't do that, that's okay. You don't trust me, basically. You need to work with somebody you trust.
Right.
But I have to basically dress them down.
Yeah, definitely more information is better. If I don't need it, that's fine. But the more you can give me, the more comprehensive picture I'll have and the better advice I'll be able to give you.
Now, what happens when you, because I work with an older attorney up in Ohio, Dick Lauf was his name, he passed away, a great guy, he's a real estate attorney actually. I said to him one day, I said, Dick, so I got a question for you on a golf course with golfing, he's a really good golfer. I said, so Dick, I got a question for you. He said, what's that? I said, what do you do when you get a client and you're like, oops, this is over my head. So what do you do when have you ever had a client where you're like, oh, I'm going to need help on this? You go internally? Is there other firms that you go to that maybe have a specialty in that regard?
Sure. Yeah, so let's take something like a client who has international property or international beneficiaries. That does occasionally happen. So certainly we would collaborate with an attorney who would have expertise, maybe in the international tax law.
Sure. Yeah, you just made me think about, I just introduced Peggy to a client that lives in Prague. And thank you for that, by the way, because I'm like, oops, now what do we do? But Peggy's able to create a kind of a special document that he will need. But yeah,
he lives in Prague.
He lives in Prague.
Wow,
terrific. He's a great guy. But so you've been really good about handling those types of things, kind of unique situations. So again, I think she's very capable. So anybody out there needing a really great attorney, you want to get hold of Peggy. So.
Peggy, as a pastor, I often have people in my office and talked about the importance of having a will. And people often ask me questions. And I said, well, go talk to those who know, but I'll tell you what I do know. Do you have any idea, or are there any national averages of a percent of people that really have a will, or maybe that don't have a will? Do you know anything on that?
Yeah, I think there are various statistics out there. Probably less than half of folks have wills in place. I think a lot of people just think they don't need it. They don't need an estate plan. Well, I don't have that many assets.
So is there something that pastors or community leaders can do to encourage that? Obviously, I'm sold on wills, and for me it was a trust. But is there something that can be done? I mean, is there literature that you have that in need of a will, that type of thing?
Yeah. Actually, the Florida Bar Association has some great consumer pamphlets. You just Google the Florida Bar, and that gives you just some basic information. That's a good place to start. And for clients who have some financial challenges, I know I work with legal aid associations, and I assist low-income clients. So if they have, those financial issues, they should contact their local legal aid.
Sure.
Thank you. Traven, each week that we do this, sometimes we have Bible subjects, sometimes we have psychological subjects. It's amazing the different topics we deal with. It seems like the time flies, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. And thank God we've had a lot of different topics,
Yeah, I think wills and trust is a very, very important topic that people need to be aware of.
Yeah, and I don't want to dominate with all the questions because I've...
No, you should. That's your field. It's your field.
So I asked Peggy to come in and talk about wills and trusts, but I'm basically asking her questions constantly. So, but if there's any information that you would like to kind of impart to our audience, I want you to think about that. We're getting ready to take a break, but think about something else that you would like to communicate to the kind of general public. And I'm glad you brought up the legal aid thing, because there are people out there that maybe need some advice, but they may not have the resources to pay for it. And the other question I had for you, and you can address it now or later, but if someone comes to you for that first consultation, is there a charge, or how does that work?
Yeah, so just to kind of meet my overhead expenses, I do have to charge a fee when I meet with clients, but I try to be as flexible as I can and, understanding of their specific situations.
Okay, sounds good.
And your office is there with the rest of the organization you work with, right?
Yeah, we're right up the street on our triangle.
Yeah, you're right in what I want to call the old Sun Trust building, but it's now called Truist Bank building. Nice facility. I've been there. So you're very convenient, being here. So, but I think we're going to take a break, Ray, and then I'm going to probably talk about our sponsors. Thank you.
All right. We are going to take a break, and we'll have more from the preacher's kid and the pastor in just a
So
moment.
we've been hitting you with a lot of questions, so.
That's okay.
Well done, well done.
So if there's anything you wanna impart, you know.
Okay,
It sounded like you're a little nervous.
a little bit.
So here's the way to cut the nervousness. If you put a smile on your face, it naturally calms you down.
Okay.
Believe it or not.
I thought you were gonna give us some vodka, you know?
That means a different kind
Skull
of
vodka is the
smile.
next one. Mezcal,
I'm gonna-
tequila.
I'm gonna do the service, you do that, I'll do the service.
Okay, good.
All right, we got about 25
We-
seconds
we'll
or
do
so,
our
and I got the mic
sponsors,
by
and
the
then have
down.
you
So
just
don't
kinda
worry.
talk about
Okay.
And next week,
maybe
we're having all these
some
sponsors
new
come.
things.
I know. We're gonna have to have another room. All right, stand
Things
by.
we should be aware of.
Okay.
Go kick her out of
I'll
here.
let you kind of talk about.
Hang on.
Okay.
There we go.
And feel free to ask us questions. So, you know, so here's a man who's a world of knowledge. So just ask any, I said you can ask us questions.
And we return you now to the preacher's kid and the pastor. And here are your hosts, Pastor Dino and Trayvon. And gentlemen,
You know, at our church this Sunday, Ray, it's Ladies' Day, but you can come, my friend.
what,
It's Mother's Day, you know.
I was
so
going to say,
we're
what are you
having
trying to
Ladies'
say here?
But all men are invited, 10 o'clock, our wonderful church. We have a great church. I'm going to speak Sunday on 4 godly women, 2 in the Old Testament, 2 in the New Testament. 2 in the Old, I don't think we think much about. 2 in the New, I think we do. But 4 godly women and why the scripture speaks about their godliness. And we're a friendly church. Harris Cafe is open. Traven, we have a good time at Harris, don't we?
We do. A lot of sugar there.
A lot of sugar. We have the best sugar per pound in that block, I think, for many blocks. Maybe.
Yeah, Mr. Kennedy, who's head of our health department nationally, would not be happy with us.
We will invite him to our church, but not at Harris Cafe.
No, not yet. He would be like, you guys need to get the sugar out of here. And I don't disagree with him, so, you know. So
Yeah, I agree.
Sugar's,
Tell us about those
it's
sponsors.
sweet, but it can be killing us. So, hey, yeah, we want to give a shout out to our sponsors. Obviously, Peggy's here with us today, and we're just delighted that she's been one of our sponsors on both programs, and we're just, it's so terrific to have her here, so we really thank her a great deal. Also, John McDonald, CPA over in Palm City. John's my personal accountant. He just does a terrific job, and he can be reached at 772-221-8882. Again, 772-221-8882. That's John McDonald. He's terrific. Also want to give a shout out to Paul Piatti, Home Improvements. If you need a professional, he's been doing it a long time.
He's terrific. He really is.
Really good at it. He can be reached at 772-546-3403. Again, 772-546-3403. Paul Piatti, Home Improvements. Also, if you need someone from a plumber standpoint, you can give 2 Anchors Plumbing a call at 772-210-2084. Again, 772-210-2084. And you can ask for Larry Grubb and for Tom McGinn. They're both great. They'll get the job done for you, get you on their schedule, get it done for you.
They've helped us a lot at the church, haven't they?
They really have. I mean, these guys are just so great. You know, and they get it and they do it correctly. Matter of fact, he did a system for me this year, and he was just on it. I mean, he got it done, so it was great. And it's working out really well. Thanks, Larry. So also I want to shout out to Deb Hollister, Hollister Insurance. I've known Deb too, just like you. I've worked with Debbie for probably 7-8 years. She's on the health insurance side. Just does a great job, very knowledgeable. And Hollister Insurance, and she can be reached at 772-288-2389. Again, 772-288-2389. These are wonderful people, and I'll probably take our balance of our sponsors here when we take the break. So thanks to all of our sponsors there.
Yeah, they are a great group of sponsors, and we appreciate them so much. Peggy, let me ask you this, with the kind of work that you do, what would you say, this has nothing to do with Wilson Trust, but what would you say is like one of those aha moments that really is special in your field? I like to know that from time to time. There's moments in my field as a minister, there are wonderful things that happen, and people's lives are changed. But what is it in your field?
Well, I would say rewarding moments are when we complete an estate plan And clients, I'm like, oh, I'm so relieved. This was on my to-do list for years. I finally gotten it done. So that's definitely rewarding. And, when we can kind of wrap up an estate administration, which is an emotional process, bring closure to the family. That's just,
I think that's good to hear, Trayvon, because, we know in our field what we really enjoy and what the blessing is, but I think in every field there needs to be some aha moments. Those, wow, look at that, and it's good to hear that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know what that was, so I'm glad you told me that today.
Yeah. I get hugs from clients sometimes. That's
Oh,
nice.
good, that's
Yeah.
a good thing,
Yeah.
yeah. So I was thinking about this earlier too, is like, what attracted you to law? I mean, that's, something you must have clicked early on is like, I want to do that, I want to be an attorney. Was there somebody in your family or someone you looked up to that, that you're like, it's really interesting,
Sure.
this legal field?
No attorneys in my immediate family, and my parents are both educators. But growing up right outside the DC area, we talked about politics and current events all the time. So social studies was my favorite class in middle school and high school. Just kind of naturally led into law.
Well, yeah. My brother, he started out of, he was a pretty good football player in Ohio, but he went to Ohio Northern, which was a pretty good law school there. But he changed his major from law to finance. Actually, he stayed in the finance side. But that's an interesting field. And being an advisor, financial advisor, we have recruited a number of people out of the legal community as a financial advisors because they have really good knowledge. I mean, they know documents. So a lot of those have really worked out over the years. So that's good.
My son, who teaches at American Heritage, great prep school down here, social studies, that's his number one thing. He can tell you all about the presidents too. Who was good and who wasn't.
Now, Peggy, are there things that are happening within the legal community right now, laws changing, those kinds of things that you would like to update the listeners on, anything that's happening? I know the laws are ever changing. Are there any kind of current events going on that are laws that are changing you think that they should be aware of?
Well, I think the thing we're kind of keeping our eye on, which applies not to a huge segment of the population, is just the estate tax exemption status. So currently we have an enhanced estate tax exemption of approximately 14 million. And that means your estate, when you pass away, has to exceed $14 million to be subject to estate tax. That exemption is set to sunset at the end of this year to about 5 million adjusted for inflation. So that's a big kind of topic on everyone's mind, the estate tax and tax planning community.
You're referring to the federal tax.
Federal estate tax, as Florida doesn't have a estate tax.
I was going to ask you whether or not Florida, I didn't think they did have a state tax.
Correct.
That's another reason to live here, right?
I like some of those reasons to live here. That's one of them, yeah.
No estate tax, no income tax.
Are there any things within wills and trusts that you would like to kind of impart to our listeners out there that that you think is critical things that they should think about?
I think, like I said before, everyone should have at least a basic estate plan that's going to take the stress off your family in the future. So if you do become incapacitated, you've clearly laid out, who should be making decisions, what your wishes are. So just get something in place.
You see sometimes a hesitancy on people's part to do a will or a trust, and if so, what are some things that you think that maybe a family member should discuss with them on this kind of a, lack of a better term, maybe a strong term, inducement? What could they do to get them to take action?
Sure. So I think they can be difficult decisions to make. Choosing among your children, or we have clients here who don't have family members. So who's going to be in charge if there is no family member?
That's an interesting scenario.
Yeah.
I noticed, Peggy, in my
Okay,
ministry
Bob.
from time to
Let
time,
me put you on
people are
hold.
afraid
We'll get
to
you on
do
air.
it. Kind of, it's a fear of the unknown.
Thank you, sir.
They don't think they have the records right. They don't think they know what their money really is. And I guess if somebody comes in not knowing all of that, you can just help them right through that, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I try to be upfront with clients and tell them what the process is. These are the documents we're going to be preparing. This is how I handle it. So, yeah.
We're glad to have Bob calling in today. Bob, welcome to the program. Thank you for calling in. And what is your question, sir?
Sure, yeah, that's a great question. So oftentimes elder care attorneys or elder law attorneys are involved when a client or a family member anticipates or has an immediate need for Medicaid services. So if you have a medical condition where you think you might need or anticipate qualifying or trying to qualify for Medicaid, that would be a great time to engage a other law attorney. Additionally, if you have a family member who may need a guardianship, other law attorneys typically handle guardianships as well.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead, Rob.
So they really handle very technical, rule-specific area of Medicaid planning. It's you really need to be kind of a specialist in that area to appropriately represent a client. Yeah.
Hey, thanks for calling in, Bob. Appreciate it so much. And again, calling in 220-WSDU or 9788. We'd be glad to hear from you. And we're talking about wills and trusts. And Trayvon, this has been an exciting program tonight because I don't think too many people deal with this on the radio.
Probably not.
Yeah, and so it's a very helpful thing. And the fact is, I really appreciate what you said about the young lady who's 18 and she needs to start right away. I have children and we've talked to our children about those kind of things, but also the fact that less than 50% of the people have a will. And so there's going to be a lot of confusion in that family down the road if these things aren't dealt with. So whether it's fear or whatever it's that people have in their way, it's good to get right on there. So how do people get a hold of you, Peggy? Give us a little information about yourself and get you at.
Sure. So I'm with McCarthy Summers. We're right up the street here in Stewart, 2400 Southeast Federal Highway. You can find us just by Googling us. Yeah, we'd be thrilled to speak with any folks who are interested in just learning some more.
Yeah, and if you call Peggy, tell her that Trayvon referred you.
Just
kidding. I had a couple of questions for you, and you can answer it after the break too. I just recently had a client or a prospect, I should say, that was introduced to me, but she lost her husband. He's 54, cancer, and she knew where most things were, type thing.
Mm-hmm.
But she said, I'm going through that process to make sure that he didn't have an account that I didn't know about. She recently did find one. There's got to be a process that you go through, especially if someone says, I'm not really sure what mom and dad had, type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like if there was a family that played real close to the vest and they didn't really share with their children, there's probably a process that you go through to try to determine like what assets are out there for these folks and what creditors may be out there.
Mm-hmm.
What a good question.
And we can talk about that because it may be pretty detailed after we come back, but when you think about that, the type of thing. So,
Yeah, I've known many people like that, and somewhere in a book, in a shelf, there's a very important document on page 394, chapter 18, and they find it and they say, oh, look at this and look what this means. I think that's a great question. I'm looking forward to hearing what you got to say about that.
yeah.
Right, it's time for a little break here, I guess, right? For a little.
Yes, we'll take a break on the Preacher's Kid and the Pastor. And feel free to call in at 220-9788. That's 220-WSTU.
Yeah, so I had always interested me, what is that process to go through? Yeah.
We
Because I know
execute
there's a lot of
sound
times you have
financial
lists like in
plans
the news.
utilizing customized goals and objectives by offering a wide variety of services, including social security, tax management, investment management, retirement strategies, and estate conservation. Should a product solution be needed, we provide
All right, guys, about 30 seconds or so.
explanations of
You know,
And I'm gonna do our other sponsors, and I'm gonna go back to
Next Master Group has been working with individuals and businesses in the area for over 40
all right,
years.
about 20 seconds. Stand by.
Today At 77.
And now we'll return you to the preacher's kid and the pastor and your hosts, Pastor Dino and Trayvon.
Thank you, Ray. And next week, Trayvon, we're going to have, I think, really a special program as we're inviting our various sponsors to come in.
Yes.
And we're going to spend some time with them. And they've been very great friends for us. They really are. And so we're going to have a lot of fun next week. I'm not sure how we're going to usher them in and usher them out. I think we got that organized pretty well.
We do. Yeah.
But it's going to be a fun time. And it's hard to believe that we're so quickly moving along on these Friday night programs. And we appreciate so much the station who's been so supportive of us as these sponsors. But we have a few more sponsors to chat about.
We
Then
do.
we'll get to that
Yeah,
question.
and I'm glad you brought up the next weekend's program because we will be having, not all of them can make it because they have other commitments, but many will be joining us and really having each of them talk a little bit about what it is they do. Because we do give a little plug for them, but we're just not in a position to do it as eloquently as they are. Okay, let's just say it that way because they know their business. So we have them come in. But again, I did want to, again, if you're interested in talking with Peggy, she can be reached at 772-286-1700. Again, 772-286-1700. Also want to give a shout out to our friends at Pools by Greg, Terry Wicks. He's been building custom pools for over 40 years. If you need a custom pool built or you need some work done from a maintenance standpoint, give Terry a call. He can be reached at 772-370-5025. Again, 772-370-5025. Just a wonderful man. Give him a call. He's terrific. Also, another company that we are just so delighted that one of our sponsors is Sunny Coast Landscape. And you can reach Sandra Barnett at 772-215-0940 and 772-215-0940. They've been doing landscaping for over 40 years here in Martin County and also Palm Beach County. And also another good friend of ours, a good friend of Dino's actually, is Homer Inman, Mac. He's an attorney. He too can be reached at 850-459-1153. 850-459-1153. He works all over the state. So, and I think we're going to get him on the phone next week.
That's the plan next week.
I'm looking forward to that. He's also a minister, so that we're going to get a twofer there.
He's a lawyer and he's a minister. He'll say a lot, I'll bet, right?
Yeah, we might just turn the program over to him. Make it easy for us, right? But yeah, he sounds like a terrific guy. So I know he is.
Yeah, he is a wonderful guy.
But yeah, I asked you the question, Peggy, about kind of that process of, how do you determine the people that are out there, maybe their assets are floating and someone who's passed away and or a creditor to help the survivors, clean it up, so to speak.
Sure. So hopefully on the front end with the estate planning process, we get all that asset information. So we, I really enjoy partnering with you, that are financial advisors, with accountants, to make sure I have a comprehensive picture of the client's finances. So hopefully we have that information. If it's a client we haven't worked with who's coming, their family's coming to us for an estate administration, there's some kind of practical tips we give. Get the tax return. That'll help give us an asset information. Monitor the mail. Of course, fewer people have paper statements these days, but the mail should give us some information. Hopefully the client, made a list of assets or gave some forethought to, really compiling their financial information, to make that available.
Are you, for some reason, and maybe I'm having a mental lapse, but is there a public notice that then is created in the old days newspapers?
Yeah.
Is there a public notice that goes out and through some of our new media that's available?
There is, if we have a formal estate administration. So I mentioned those two flavors of administration. With a summary administration, we don't necessarily have a publication period where creditors are put on notice.
Okay.
If there's a formal administration, we do. It's a 3-month period. And that's something I talk through with the family. Sometimes we don't even need an estate administration because the assets were in a trust or had beneficiaries designated. But there can be a benefit to publishing that notice. If we do have the publication period, creditors have 3 months to file a claim against the estate. If there is no publication period, creditors have up to 2 years to file a claim against an estate. So sometimes, the beneficiaries or the family want certainty or kind of closure on creditor, the creditor picture, so they will opt to have that publication period anyway, just to accelerate that period.
So legally, if it's 3 months, is that what you said?
Correct.
If it's done in 3 months and it's out in the public like that, is that where it legally ends and nobody can come back on something? Is that accurate or not?
Pretty much, and ascertainable, because these are kind of technical terms, but if you notice the creditors that should be noticed, that are entitled to notice, and you've got that publication period, then yes, you've kind of wound up the creditor issues.
So I would say, and Peggy, you correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of communication needs to be done by families to get all of this stuff ready, right? Because it is, I've had my parents die, my wife's parents died, we've gone through some of these things. And I have always found the more communication and understanding that you have, I know when you have a meeting, sometimes your mind goes other places and it's time to focus, right, Tracy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You touched on this a little bit earlier. Dino asked about this. What do you do if you have someone who has, let's say, has developed in state, and as you're going through the process, you determine they really do not have next of kin. They don't have a son, daughter, grandchildren, niece, and nephew. How do you settle that estate? What happens to the assets? Those types of things. Have you had that happen?
Yeah, and I'm trying to think if I've ever had an estate with no kind of identifiable beneficiaries. I will say most folks think if you don't designate beneficiaries, then your assets pass to the state of Florida.
Yeah.
That's actually not the case.
Oh, good.
Your assets pass to your heirs at law, as that's defined under the Florida statutes. If no heirs at law can be located, only in that event do your assets. It's called SG.
Is that Florida law or is that national law? Is that Florida
It's
law?
under the Florida probate
Florida
code.
law.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
I'm glad we covered that. I've heard the same thing. Go
Yeah.
assets to the state. That's not true.
Right?
There's a process.
Correct. And that's why it's important to have a will, because you may not want your assets to pass to your heirs at law, and that's what would happen if you didn't have a will. By drafting a will, having a will in place, you have control over who gets your assets.
Now, what's the best, or one of the ways that you have handled, like my mother-in-law, pick on her for a second. She loves jewelry, and so she always wants to list her jewelry. And I think I have friends who have car collections, gun collections, coin collections. What's the best way to handle that for somebody, you think? But just to pass it.
So a lot of clients actually like to give items during lifetime.
Prior to.
Yeah. And it's nice. You can see your beneficiary enjoy the special piece of jewelry or that item during your lifetime. Otherwise, if you want specific items to pass to specific persons, then you would want to list those, specifically in the proper form.
Yeah, now do you have a form that you could use or draft for that person? Should they just want to list, like, I want to give Tommy, my 1967 Matt Mustang. I want to give Sarah my 1971 Mustang. You help them create a list, so to speak.
Yeah, the Florida statutes just state that the list has to be signed and dated. So it's not very technical form.
It has to be notarized or anything?
It doesn't have to be notarized.
Okay.
You have to sign.
Yeah, so it makes sense so to do that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dino, do you have a question?
Traven, I just want to thank you for leading this discussion today. You've done a great job with that. And Peggy, I want to thank you for coming in. You've been a help to us and a help to our community out here. Thank you so much. This is an interesting topic. And when we talked about our topics coming up, we talked about wills and trust. And that's not something you talk about on the air sometimes, you know, but I thought to myself, that is a great subject.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you coming out, Peggy.
My pleasure.
And Ray,
You know I do.
Ray, it's been great seeing you back there running the show. You, as always, you do a great job. We appreciate you so much. And next week, we're gonna have some fun with the traffic coming in and coming out of here, Ray. So get ready, get a good night's rest for that. And we'll get rested up. Yeah, thank you, Peggy.
My
Bless your
pleasure.
heart.
Thank you
God
for having
bless you.
me.
Thanks, Ray.
Stewart Congregational Church, Sunday morning, 10 o'clock, 4 godly women we're gonna talk about. Looking forward to seeing you there. 3110 Astor Lane, Stewart.
Thanks, guys.
WSTU, Stewart.
See, we got through it.
Yeah.
So you could talk about
Hey, that was
Esther and
wonderful.
Ruth, and
What's
you
that?
gonna cover Esther and Ruth?
Oh, I'm not gonna tell you. You gotta read that.
Oh, Mary Magdalene?
I'll bet you can never guess the 4.
Well, I've got probably 3 of them. I'm
Who'd
missing
you
one.
say,
I said
Esther?
Esther,
No,
Ruth,
no,
Mary Magdalene.
no,
Oh, what did I,
no,
who did I
no,
miss?
no. There's people
Oh,
that are
man.
different.
Not Nyla, is it? No. Oh, we got a lady in our
Nyla.
church. Nyla. Oh, she's a
I'll
good
tell you
lady.
one of the 4, and she's hardly ever noticed. Hold up.
See, that was perfect, guys.
Oh,
She's found twice in scripture, it's the same story. And they were looking for an answer from the Lord, and they wanted to hold up. Who was a prophet? And she always wanted to tell them what was what. And she got it.
We did one on Ladies of the Bible, and we did a couple of Ruth, Esther,
Yeah.
Mary Magdalene, and missing somebody. But
Listen, Dorcas.
it was fascinating. Like Mary Magdalene was always